Hey, Stephen Yanni here at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts, doing the junkyard crawl with a 1995 Taurus GL station wagon. Why? Well, we have to remember when the Taurus debuted in 1986, it ushered into the entirety of Detroit the era of jelly bean styling. Now, what do I talk about jelly beans? Well, that's sort of when they're rounded off and the major objective is aerodynamic efficiency for better fuel economy. The whole point was the EPA instituted a thing called the CAFE, Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standard, and all automakers had to meet a certain number with every single year or pay huge fines. So in the case of Ford with the Taurus, they decided to really maximize aerodynamics. These things have a coefficient of drag, or a CD, of 0.32, which is actually better than a Porsche 911 of 1986 vintage. So these were very, very aerodynamically stable to get great fuel economy, but again, kind of boring cars. Now this one is a station wagon, and we see here GL. Of course, there was the GL, the SE, the LX, and the SHO, the super high output. But the SHO was strictly a four-door, never a wagon. And speaking of Taurus, there were no two-door Tauruses or Tauri, and never a convertible. And of course, like all Tauruses or Tauri, they're front-wheel drive. We see the telltale nut, the spindle nut here of the driven front half shaft right there. On a rear-wheel drive car, of course, we see a dust cap in that spot right there. These have disc brakes up front, drums in the back, and this one here, being a 1995, is the second year for standard airbags inside. Now this one has a pretty big hornet's nest. We're going to open the door and yeah, okay, we'll just leave those guys alone. But inside we can see the steering wheel, and that SRS logo on the steering wheel stands for Supplemental Restraint System. And again, the airbag was first seen in 1994 as standard equipment in the Taurus. This also has anti-lock brakes, or ABS, which were an option in the Taurus, except for the SHO, where it was standard. Now this one is a wagon, which is a very rare body style. Here's why. Now the first Taurus, the first gen, of course, arrived. It was wagons and four-doors. This is a second gen. Now this is a 1995, which makes it the last year for the second gen Taurus. Well, here's the deal. On the second gen Tauruses, they had an all-new body, with the exception of the wagons. The wagons utilized the same wagon shell from the front fender's back, or from the windshield back, as the first generation Taurus. And the whole point was, in 1995, 396,000 Tauruses were built in total. Of them, only 51,000 were wagons. So Ford says, you know, we're not going to tool up an all-new body for the wagon because we only sell like 1 in 7 station wagons. So again, the second generation Taurus wagon used the first generation Taurus's body shell. But up at the front, well, whole new car, of course. From the fenders forward, the second gen Taurus was rounder, if that's even possible, than the first generation Taurus. Now this one here, let's see what engine we have. Now the GL has the 3-liter. This, of course, is what we call the Vulcan 3-liter V6. There was also an optional 3.8-liter Essex V6. Now, you check this out. They both made the same 140 horsepower, but this one has 165 foot-pounds of torque. The 3.8 made 215 foot-pounds of torque. So again, the 3.0 or the 3.8 were possible. No 4 cylinders in the second generation Taurus, although you could get those in the first gen. What a slow car that was. But again, these are push-rod engines, nothing exotic, no overhead cams, nothing like that. And part of the aerodynamic strategy was what we call an underbreather, or a bottom feeder cooling system. Notice how the grille doesn't have any openings really, except for down here. Again, that's bottom feeder architecture right there. All the air goes here into the radiator. And this styling trend and trait right here set the standard for Oldsmobile, Pontiac, General Motors, Chrysler Corporation. Again, the jelly bean styling kind of started right here. Now here's the thing. This is a 1995 Ford Taurus catalog, and we can see right here, that's what the Taurus looks like on the front, and then inside here is a wagon. And that's the Taurus. Not a very pretty car, but these things were America's best-selling car for decades. So people like them. But this is 1995. Well, 1996 brought us the third gen, and look at this. The jelly bean thing really came on strong. Everything's rounded off. Even better CD, or aerodynamic efficiency. But again, not a very pretty car. But again, the third generation Taurus got an all-new wagon style with a rounded tail and, you know, quite a bit of advancements, disc brakes, etc. Now, the real one you want is the Taurus SHO, the super high output. But again, that's only a four-door sedan. There were no wagons done, at least nothing for production. They undoubtedly made some engineering mules and show cars, but nothing that you or I could ever buy. There's something kind of cool again. Second year, standard anti-lock brakes on Taurus. If we look up here on the firewall, we'll see this little thing right here. It says anti-lock test right there. And you take this little plug off, and your dealer would plug this into a diagnostic machine and just make sure that the ABS system was functioning properly. And again, it's part of the electronic invasion that came along as we get into the 1980s on cars. And another thing that's kind of weird about this, now we see in the middle of the grille the Ford logo. There's the blue oval, which was newly embraced by Ford. I believe in 1985 or 86, maybe even 84, they started paying tribute to their past with the Ford script right there from the 1920s and 30s. Henry Ford signature, so to speak. But what's this doing here? Mopar. What? Wait a minute, what? Well, if you look closely, it says R134A, leak detection die. So at some point, the owner of this Taurus Ford Wagon went to the local Chrysler dealer where the Mopar service department checked out the AC unit to see if it had a leak or not. So this is a kind of a weird deal, a Mopar service sticker on a Ford. But again, you know, Chrysler or Ford dealers or GM dealers will certainly work on any car that comes in the door if they're paying. So that's the story of the Ford Taurus, second generation. Again, this is a 1995 wagon, fairly rare. About 51,000 of these things were built versus 396 four-door and full, you know, the regular Taurus line. So pretty rare bird in its time. There were some all-wheel drive versions of these things, which are pretty rare to find too. But again, this is the car, sad to say, or happy to say, you choose, that brought in a serious emphasis on aerodynamics for better fuel economy. The Jelly Bean styling trend started right here. Now, in some other videos we features here, the new Beetle by Volkswagen, you know, another decade later would arrive with retro styling. And happily, they actually sacrificed some fuel economy for that tall Beetle shell. And we also know that the 2008 Dodge Challenger, that recessed grille gave away a half a mile per gallon because they said, we're going to have that. If they made the nose of that thing round and had a bottom feeder or like a Jelly Bean type deal, the Challenger wouldn't be nearly as successful as it is. So that was a case of the stylists winning out over the bean counters. But in the case of the Taurus, the bean counters, or the Jelly Bean counters, were the ones who won. But again, these were very popular cars. But this one here has probably seen its last mile here at Berniston Auto Wrecking. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Mag's YouTube channel. We'll be back tomorrow with even more.